Hello, my friends. On today's episode, I'm speaking with the incredible Dr. Lisa Lewis, and she's back to give you some amazing tips on how to take care of yourself and your clients. And we talk a little bit about how to work with those clients that maybe your least favorite clients that drain energy from you, how to manage that, how to avoid burnout and take care of yourself as a helping professional and coach. We also talk about when the time comes, how do you gracefully and successfully break up with a client that's just not a good fit. So if any of that sounds valuable to you, keep on listening. This is an incredible conversation. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. And today, she is back again, one of my favorite podcast guests ever on this podcast. I hope you've listened to past episodes. If not, go and listen to them. But back on the podcast again is Dr. Lisa Lewis. Welcome back, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for having me back. Excited to be
Uh,
here.
it's it's always such a treat. I genuinely, I think this is true. I don't just say this when we're recording, but like when I see that Lisa is on my schedule for a podcast, I genuinely get so excited just to have a fellow nerd to nerd out about about motivation and habits and helping people make change in their lives. It's just my best life. And so, thanks again for making the time to do this.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah. And we always get such great feedback on these episodes. Our listeners really love having you on and really
Oh,
appreciate
good.
all of the practical advice you have about helping people make change in their lives. For those of
That's
you who
great.
haven't listened to a podcast with Lisa in it before, go check out our website. It's drlewisconsulting.com, Lewis. And go see. She has a wonderful course called Psych Skills for Fit Pros, where she walks you through some amazing communication conversation skills that help you make change for yourself and for clients. And it is so well regarded. Everyone I've ever sent to it has just raved about it. So we're going to dive into some of that content here today. I want to talk first about the topic we haven't covered before, which is how to manage sticky clients. Sticky is like the nice way to put it, right? So we all have clients that we love working with, that when we're around these clients, we get energy from them. We look forward to spending time with them. And we have clients at the other end of the spectrum. And so, I just want to dive into that topic a little bit today. I know it's not the most pleasant one, but it's a reality of being a helping professional. You're not going to love working with everyone that you want to work with. So I'll just talk about overall, like, what's your approach? What approach have you seen be helpful when working with maybe your least favorite clients?
Yeah. And I like how you said on the one end of the spectrum, there's clients who you get energy from, because the clients on
Mm-hmm.
the other end of the spectrum are the ones that take the energy out.
Yeah.
And so that has short-term effect, but can really have a long-term effect. So you don't want to get depleted over time and then start experiencing feelings like burnout or not enjoying your work or questioning your own ability to be a good coach. So I think it's good to be aware of who these clients are, to name it. And then
Mm,
there's really two sides to the what to do portion of it, which is what to do when you're with your client in intervention, how to boundary the session, how to talk to the client. And then there's like what to do with yourself, and
mm,
knowing what your own limits are as a professional. Because of course I'm going to recommend some strategies, but you might try all the strategies and still like get really sucked dry and just feel like it's not worth it, to
mm.
continue working with
Yeah.
that client. I think the clients that we end up referring out, it's usually a very small sliver of people. I
Yep.
think the lion's share of people we can figure out a way to work with, but every once in a while, there's just going to be that person that it's just
Yeah.
not the right chemistry.
Sometimes you just got to break
So
up, right? But
you
you're
have to
right.
break
When I
up.
when I think about MFF, or I think about my work as a business and leadership coach, that like it's a very small sliver, right? It's like a 1% kind of sliver of
Yeah,
people that I just have decided I can't work with. But I think
yeah,
the first step you mentioned there was just really kind of noticing and naming that that's what's going on for you. I think is a
yeah,
fantastic first step. It's just being able to articulate for yourself, and maybe with a trusted coworker or friend, like, can I just share what's going on when I'm with this client? Because I think that helps us acknowledge that, okay, we're not crazy. There's actually a dynamic here that is depleting me, and I need to say it and acknowledge it out loud. Yeah, and then
totally. And
yeah.
that's something I wish was in fitness more. That is
Mm,
part of psychology, so in my training, it's very important as a therapist for you to have peer supervision and to be able to talk about
Mm,
what's going on between you and your clients. So there are these topics. Some of your listeners may have heard of things like transference and countertransference. So there's like
hmm
vibes you're sending to your clients, and there's vibes your clients are sending back to you. And sometimes those vibes are jiving with somebody you used to know and really dislike, or somebody who reminds you of somebody you used to feel a certain way about. So these are the things under the surface of coaching and the X's and O's and the form and technique that really have a strong influence on your capacity to coach and enjoy your work. And then really your effectiveness and your ability
hmm
to help that client, make the change that they want. So just even the simplicity of talking with a colleague about this is what's happening for me, or this is what's going on in the session, helps you to verbalize it and name it and then treat it as a real thing that's influencing the whole dynamic.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And then I think you laid out kind of two paths of things you could work out. There are things that you could do kind of in the session, in the moment when you're actually working with them, if it's training scenario on the training floor, or things you can do for yourself before, during, after the session. Maybe let's start with the first one. So when you're in the session, what are some ways to kind of create boundaries and make a change there?
Yeah. So really the 101 of what to do is boundary setting and
Yeah.
trying to decide how you want to set limits. So everybody who's listening probably has their own and I'm moving my fingers around. So if people aren't watching, you have your own kind of like
Yeah.
dance space or your own professional boundaries. Some people are more open. Some people are more kind of closed and like
hmm
professional. So there's like knowing that for yourself where you're at, and then like who that client is, and if they like a really
Mm,
kind of more rigid professional vibe, or if they're more like more loosey goosey. Typically, the ones that suck us dry are the ones who have a lack of boundaries and are really like downloading personal issues, complaining about things,
hmm
um, are kind of bringing a lot more than just executing their training. So for the most part, when we talk about these kinds of clients, we're talking about you kind of tightening up or being really clear about your boundaries, which means starting the session right on time, having however many moments you need for, the pleasantries of hi, how are you? And hi, how are you?
Yep.
And all of that. And then saying it like very clearly in signposting, let's get you moving so you can have a really great session today. And
Yeah.
so that might
Great.
include saying things like, thank you so much for telling me all about how you're doing, but I want to make sure we don't lose too much time. So I'm going to
hmm
push us to get like right on track and get us
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
So even something like that, you're just sending these signals out to the client that now we're in this space where we're training together. And I think a lot of coaches feel like, I don't know if you ever watched somebody try to start double dutching, like, double dutch with the two
Yep.
jump
There's
ropes.
how that hesitant jumping. Yeah.
Yeah, so the client's talking, and like when the jumper's trying to go in, they're kind of like, oh, like, every move they're trying to like get in the ropes, and it can feel like that. And I want to
Mm,
encourage everybody, don't hesitate to kind of talk over somebody and say, oh, I'm so sorry to talk over you. I love hearing how things are going, but I just want to make sure that you have a really great session today. And if you start talking like that, they are going to stop. And you're
hmm
just framing it as like, this is for you, this is your time, and the way I can help you is to coach you.
Yeah.
Um, you
Well, I
know,
love that you used that example, right? And those actually those examples of the types of boundaries. That's the kind of thing I hear from our trainers at MFF and trainers that I work with, is that the kind of boundaries they want to set is ones where they can get more focused on the workout with their client. And we're not talking about what they did over the weekend or what's going on with their best friend, or,
right,
not that they're not open to hearing some of that and building a personal connection. But I think that that kind of oversharing client is the kind of client I see burning out a lot of trainers, where
right.
they want to be all friendship. And I think that those boundaries you mentioned, which is we're going to start on time. I'm going to listen to you for a little while, but then I'm going to cue to you that it's time to get started. I might even have to cue to you there's some things about your life that I actually I'm not comfortable talking about with you.
Mhm.
Right? Like I actually don't want to hear about the binge drinking you did last night with your friends and the blackout drunk that you were. There's some things you might just be not comfortable talking about with your clients, and it's okay to set those kind of boundaries too. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think the hesitation I hear sometimes is that they think that if they set those boundaries with clients, it's like bad customer service,
that's
right?
right.
That like, which,
That's
and
right.
I get that. I'm, a huge customer service nerd over here, right? And I think that you can have both, right? And then you're not going to be able to serve them at all if they're burning you out. So you kind of, the boundaries have to come first.
Right. And actually, good boundaries are really good for your clients. Like in
Yeah.
early childhood education, one of the major foci is boundaries, and that kids love boundaries and kids really
Mm,
thrive in really well boundaried relationships and environments. And the same is true for adults. And if
yeah.
your client has poor boundaries and is kind of like, messing up the structure of the session and talking, like that is something that that person does in real life also that causes
Hmm.
them problems. So you are helping them by helping them practicing getting more structured and getting more focused on the present moment and not getting distracted. So you are providing a helpful service and you are doing it from a place of positive intention,
Yeah.
and I think reminding coaches of that can help them go ahead and take that risk.
Yeah, that's really well said. That's really well said. I mean, and it just goes to show that the gym space can be a place where we help people, with their physical health, but we're also helping them with their mental health and their relationship skills and their communication skills. And this is one way we can do that. So yeah,
That's
well said.
right. And
Yeah.
that's so nice that you're saying that because I coaches like often will talk about like worrying about going outside their scope of practice or staying in their lane. And what you just said is so true. You can be totally in your lane being a coach and doing things to help people focus, pay attention, respect
Hmm.
themselves and their bodies, get a good workout, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's go. Let's pop over to the other lane you mentioned, which is how to help. Helping professionals, coaches, trainers help themselves, right? Maybe not even, excuse me, in the session, but before the session, after the session. What kind of coping strategies do you think you've seen be useful?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I notice is that when a coach is having trouble with a client or with clients, the first mode is to like think that something's wrong with them. So why do I
Mm,
get tired and or cranky and or not as good of a coach or not as effective when I'm with this person? Instead of acting more like a scientist and taking how you feel and what you think and how you perform as data.
hmm.
So if you notice in certain sessions with certain clients, you're ravenous or sleepy or kind of annoyed or, thinking about other things, or you can't seem to get through the whole workout, you can take a step back and say, what does this data mean? Is this to what extent is this about me and what's going on in my life? And to what extent could this be about the client? So just treating it like data first, I think, is a great way to go about it, as opposed to blaming yourself or knocking yourself down a peg or questioning yourself, right off the bat.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and it just goes to show, like, how valuable it can be to have a regular habit of like self reflection, right? To have a kind of reflective practice for yourself as any kind of
Mhm.
helping professional to stop and be like, okay, how are my sessions going with these clients? How am I feeling afterwards? What does that data mean?
Right.
And to recognize that you can step out of yourself and look at yourself in that way, and it's actually really valuable habit to form for yourself, I think is
Yes.
fantastic. So I love that.
Yeah.
So let's imagine that people have done that, right? They're able to step out, collect all the data, look at it as such. Then what?
Yeah. So then you've got to think about, and it is a big question, like what part of the dynamic that's going on is about me and what part
Mm,
is about them. That's a really tricky one. I find that there's people who tend to take on all responsibility for everything that's imperfect and blame themselves and be really hard on themselves. Then there's the other end of the spectrum, people, it's never about them. They have a hard time having insight and it's all about the client,
yep,
not being a
yep,
good quote unquote client. But
yep.
most of the time, it's somewhere in the
It's a
middle
combo.
where there's a chemistry of things that's going on. So, yeah, thinking about that, trying to name that. Again, I think talking to somebody and verbalizing this stuff is wicked, wicked helpful because it helps you to activate different parts of your brain and really think about this and use adjectives to describe it. Just because that helps you then to wrap your arms around it better and decide what to do. So, if this is a client who has really poor boundaries, or a client with really low self esteem, or a client who is
Mm,
so unbelievably negative, it's like a vacuum cleaner is just sucking all of the energy out of the room. If you can name that, then you can decide, okay, what do I want to try to do? What kind of intervention do I want to try to implement to have an effect on this? So
Mm-hmm.
that could be less talking and more working. That could be, if you have good rapport with the client, noticing with them when they go on a negative spiral, and like, can we stop doing that and get refocused on training to kind of help you out of that? Or one time I consulted with a coach who, she spent the whole session like almost being like a hype woman, like trying to
Mm.
fill her client up with like self-esteem and encouragement, and like it sucked her dry. And when I suggested that she stop doing that and just let the negative self-talk like just kind of
Mm-hmm.
flow out, and she was afraid of what would happen if she didn't like try to fill this client up.
Yep.
So there's that part of it. Decide what you're going to do, and then I want you to do it with intention. Whatever you're going to do, you think like
Mm.
a scientist. Like, okay, I'm going to do this intervention. This is going to be the variable, and then I'm going to measure the outcome. So whether it's you stop saying, oh no, you're not heavy, you're not this, you're not that. Whether you're doing that or whether you're being more structured, whatever it is, see what effect that has on the session, on how you feel, on how the client feels, and so on and so forth. And so just to use that example, I did end up, that coach was willing to try
Mm-hmm.
not doing that with this particular client. And she was like, I'm going to use the word flabbergasted, because
Wow.
she was really afraid that client would like fire her or just be like overwhelmed with tears and not be able to do the
Mm-hmm.
workout. But actually what she got was like extinction. Like the woman said a handful of negative things, and the coach kept going back to X's and O's and training and having a good session. And eventually she stopped doing it because she wasn't getting any
Yeah. She
reinforcement.
wasn't
And
rewarding.
then they
Yeah.
were like having a good session. So that was an
Yeah.
effective intervention for her.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think it's such a great example, Lisa. And honestly, I love that this model you're putting out to our listeners of like, think like a scientist, gather this data about yourself, take a look at it, share it with someone, get in dialogue about it, right? And then decide, what are you going to do about it? What is the first thing you're going to try? And I love the way you use that word. Like, she agreed to try it, right? And just
Mhm.
try some intervention, try some new approach, some new way of engaging, and then
Yeah.
see what the reaction is, see what the response is. You're gonna probably have to try more than one thing, right?
Right.
It's
And that's
very
it.
rarely the first thing. So just
Totally.
collect the data and then go back and reassess and try again.
Right. And then you got to get your reps in just the same way in the
Yes.
gym. It's like, your client is walking around with those boundaries and that communication style and that like
Mm-hmm.
frame all day, every day. And they're spending 1 hour with you, what, 2, 3 times a week, if you're lucky. So
Yep.
remember that you're a drop in the bucket, and remember that you're going to have to accumulate repetitions of limits that you're setting and styles of interaction that you're trying to change. And you've got to have a lot of patience with it. And you've got to, you asked earlier in the interview, can you do before a session, during a session, after a
Mm.
session? Right now, we're talking about during a session. After a session, how are you doing? What's going on in your tank? And like, do you need 10 or 15 minutes to walk outside or call a friend or have a big chug of water or something to like help you shift out of whatever space you might have gotten into or help you get some energy back? And then on the front end of it, if you decide you want to work with a client who's tough and who's taxing, what do you need to do beforehand to get
Mm-hmm.
yourself centered? Like, so just like you do your warm up before you train, what's your mental preparation before? And I think there's a lot of clients, your listeners are going to decide they want to try. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
probably some people out there who have like one person, and like their life would be better if they said goodbye to that
Yes. Yes.
client,
Yeah.
especially if they've been trying different things.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think that way of thinking about it for our listeners, I think, is so valuable. Of, when you think about being in a training session with someone, like, as a coach, you're not the one necessarily working out, but you're doing this other kind of mental workout, this kind of like relational workout when you're spending an hour trying to relate to someone, support them, encourage them, guide them, right? It can take a lot. So I love this idea of like, what's your like emotional, spiritual, mental warm up before you work with a
Right.
challenging client, and then afterwards, how do you cool down, right? How do you cool down afterwards? Do you actually need a walk around the block? Do you need to work out? Do you need a snack? Do you need to call a friend? I think
Mhm.
that those kind of self care habits make a big difference in our ability to stretch ourselves and help
Yeah.
people that are challenging. Because
Yeah.
as we're having this conversation, the thing that I'm like just so taken by is that this kind of stuff comes up all the time in our Unicorn Society group. Like, we have nearly 100 gym owners that we're talking to on a daily basis about this stuff on a Facebook group and one-on-one calls, group calls. And this is stuff that comes up every day. There's not a day that goes by where there's not a gym owner who's not reaching out to me or one of our coaches or our team to say, I'm struggling with a client relationship. They're tough in some way. They're challenging me. They're challenging my team. And this is the part of the business that no one prepared us for,
Right.
you know, right?
No
Which is why,
training, no
yeah.
education, no support. Yeah.
So, and this is
It's
why
so
your work
true.
is so vital, right? And why, groups like Unicorn Society can be so helpful is because it gives you that space for partnership to talk
Yeah.
about it and process it. And then the challenge is, I think so many gym owners are so quick to be like, that client's just not a good fit. Like,
Mm.
we're just getting crappy clients. And I think, I
Mm.
think that all the tools you're talking about here are exactly the toolbox they need to stretch themselves and work with a wider breadth of
That's
clients
right.
who are just going to be a little more challenging. And that's a great business opportunity, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
that's
need to
right.
be able to stretch yourself.
Yeah. Because in grad school for, becoming a therapist, you're not off the hook like that. Like, oh, they're not a good
Yes.
fit. Like, no, you
Yes.
got to look at
Nope.
it and look at it. You kind of got to beat it to death. And
Hmm.
it does end up being about you, which for better or worse. And I think what that does is really get you in the practice of looking at yourself first and being really reflective, which, some coaches
Yeah.
might be listening and be like, I don't want to do all that. And that's okay. But having a broader range of clients that you can work with is going to benefit you and your business
Yeah.
and your
100%.
make your function better, really.
Yeah, 100%. Let's just dive into that the last point you were making. Just and this will be my last question. Is let's just say that we do find that 1-2% of time we do have to break up with the client. It's just not a
Hmm.
good fit.
Yeah,
How do you do it gracefully? How do you do it with
yeah,
integrity? How do you do
yeah,
it in a way that lets them leave your gym and maybe still say great things about you? Like, what does
right.
that look like?
Yeah. So I really think you have to build that data set
Mm,
and collaboratively with the client. So what I mean by
mm,
that is start talking about what is happening. So, you know what, Beth? I noticed that you and I just like get going and we get chit chatting, and it's really hard to get started. And then when that happens, it's hard for us to get through all your sets and reps. And so I want to let you know that during this session, I'm going to be focused on really making sure we can get through. So you've planted seed number one, right? And then
right.
next session or two sessions after, you say, hey, Betty, I want to just go back because I've been trying to really like keep us focused and keep us centered. And it's so fun talking to you. But also, I just feel like you and I are getting off track a lot. And I'm wondering what could help you to stay like more targeted so you can really like get the most out of your training. So then you're bringing them in and you're planting seed number two. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
Yep.
then it's not, the elephant in the room is getting talked about, and it's not all you holding it. You are
Yeah.
sharing it in so then there's the next, gosh, how are things going for you? Because I have to say, I'm starting to feel like once we get 30 minutes into the session, I'm getting a little antsy and I'm like kind of getting frustrated with myself because I know I'm not getting you through the way I really want to. Like, are you feeling that?
Hmm.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you're sharing your emotions, but you're not, this isn't working for me. You're just like wondering and you're curious and you're sharing what's going on for you and you're building it. So you're not dropping a bomb on them 10 sessions in when you say, I'm feeling like I'm not the best fit for you. And I'm wondering if working with, I don't know, one of my colleagues, or
Yep.
I wonder if like if you love the whole Peloton thing so much that like this is just a
Yeah.
different vibe for you. I don't know. Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
And so if they say, I've been thinking that too, that's a conversation. And then if they say, oh no, I really want to come in here and like I really need to get stronger, then that's an opportunity to be like, well, I've been thinking about this a lot and I'm wondering if trying a different coach, or saying like, okay, I think for us to be productive, here's what I would need. Right. And then
Mm,
you get to kind of negotiate with them. So that it's just like a relationship. You're talking about it.
yeah.
There's no bombs getting dropped. And it's not a surprise to the client how you're feeling when you get to the point where you're talking about breaking up.
100%. Yeah, what a beautiful picture you painted there. I mean, it starts with, really the first thing you mentioned, which is trying to make some change. Share with them you're trying to make some change. Ask their thoughts and feelings about how the change is going. Articulate that that things aren't still working, right? There's this evolution of the conversation. If you bring them along for the ride with you and share what's going on and share what you're trying to work on, then it shouldn't be surprised if you have to get to the point where it's like, I just feel like this has not been working out. How do you feel? Right? Like that shouldn't be a surprise if you've been sharing what you're working on all along. And what this makes me think of is we talk about this all the time when it comes to managing employees. Right? An employee should never be surprised if they got fired, right? There should
Yes.
be many, many, in fact, documented conversations, escalating conversations about the fact that we've been trying. And at the very end, we often use performance improvement plans as the final step. And that's basically what you mentioned with the client. If they're like, no, 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 I really want to try and make this work. Okay, well, this is when I get to negotiate and say, well, here's what I really need to see from you in the next few weeks for this
Right.
really to work out. What do you need to see from me? Right. And it becomes this conversation, right? Like we're gonna hit reset here. We both have to really be committed to it. This is our last effort. If not, I am going to really hook you up with the other trainer, right? And I think that there's such a parallel path between how we do this with clients and how we do this with staff members.
Yeah. And I think, you could also in the data set include, no shows or last minute
Mm,
cancellations. That could be for
yeah,
you. I just want to be curious with you because I know you got a lot going on in your life, but I noticed that you canceled two and then you had a no show. So I'm wondering if there's like any part of you that's just like not feeling this.
yeah.
So you can bring that data in as well. Or if they're like constantly complaining and every single word out of their mouth is a complaint, it's like I just want to check in with you because what I'm getting from you in our work together is that you are not satisfied. Is that right?
Mm,
You know?
yeah.
And so it's reflecting to them. You're not saying you are nonstop bitching the entire time we're together, but you're just reflecting the data and
Yeah.
I wonder about that. And that is really a way to give them more ownership and make them part of the process where you don't feel like you are the one making yourself like a pretzel,
Hmm.
and just taking on whatever because you think that that's customer
Yeah.
service.
Yeah. Beautifully said. I mean, what a pro. I think it just goes to show that when you can get practice doing this and having these conversations, it becomes a little easier over time. You have the words and the frameworks in your mind for how to guide these conversations. And so I just want
Mhm.
to share that with listeners that if you hear those words coming out of Lisa's mouth and it sounds so easy and so organic for her, it's because she's done this for thousands of hours,
Yeah.
right? That you might not feel like you can find those words as easily yet, dear listener, and you will. This will come with practice and experience, but it requires you to try some new ways of communicating with your clients. Like try some of the things that Lisa has shared today, and you will get better at it. It'll feel it's never maybe the most fun part of our job, right? It's never especially the firing a client part. It's never going to be fun or enjoyable, but it doesn't have to be so hard. And it doesn't have to be feel impossible. Right? I think this path that we've laid out in this conversation is a great place to start. Um,
Mhm.
well, I could keep going all day, as you know, but I'm going to be disciplined and stop myself from asking more questions and just say thank you. This was such a great conversation, as always, full of great takeaways for our listeners. If our listeners want more Dr. Lisa Lewis in their life, where can they find you? What are you working on now that they could get excited about? What's going on in your
Yeah.
world?
Thank you. Well, I do have a little Instagram account that is my baby, and about twice a
Hmm.
week, 3 times a week, I will post on, kind of this interplay between strength training, exercise, and mental health, wellness, motivation. different psychological. So that's psychological and physical marriage there. So that's like probably the lowest hanging fruit. My
Yeah.
website, if you go to drlewisconsulting.com, podcasts that I've been on are there, articles that I've written. Also, you can take a look at my course, The Psych Skills for Fit Pros, Volume 1, which reviews motivation, motivational interviewing, and the nature and stages of change. And right now, what I'm working on is volume 2, which is the much squishier stuff that we talked about today, which is
Mm.
healthy boundaries, preventing burnout, transference and countertransference, you know, knowing thyself and how your mind and you as a person impacts how you coach and how you can use your strengths and be aware of your weaknesses to enhance your coaching and your business, really. And then my husband and I recently put out an app that we're still working on, kind of for future renditions of or future programming. It's called Strong Body, Strong Mind. And
Mm.
my husband, Tony Gentilcore, is a strength coach. So he's doing the actual coaching and the X's and O's and technique around the exercises. So it's a 3-month program, strength training program that is barbell forward. And then I have a mindset minute or segment every single day that there's a training session. And those
Wow.
moments, you know, this is for clients themselves, it's not for coaches. So that is how to identify your motivation, how to harness and leverage it, how to stay motivated over time, how to make behavior change that really sticks and is sustainable. So we'll continue to put more and more programs inside of that application, and I hope build up like a really robust library of the physical exercises, but also the mental exercises and mental toughness really training for folks.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to see the app myself. It sounds incredible.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, listeners, as I said before, I can't recommend her course enough. You know, Psych Skills for Fit Pros. Everyone that I've sent has raved about it. I think some of the reviews on your website are from Unicorn Society members, or that I've
Yeah.
seen. There's a lot of great people who've taken the course and highly recommend it. So go take it. Thank you again for your time, Lisa. It's a pleasure as
Thank you.
always, and I can't wait to do. I can't wait until we do this again. Have a great rest of your
Yes.
day, y'all. See you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.